In this video, I'll show you how you can use Figaf to test and manage your SAP integrations. We'll see how you can create test cases, how you can manage mock endpoints and stuff like that, all as a part of how to work a little more efficient about creating more advanced test cases. And then at the end, we will also cover the other concept. This is where you have one iflows that calls multiple different iflows and you want to be able to do extensive testing of these things. So we have multiple different ways we can go around this testing. So we will start out with just a single iflow that we want to be testing. And we have a number of options to do this. One is our legacy approach is you go in here in CPI helper. You can obviously also use regular CPI. And then you go and say, hey, we want to trigger this iflow. So I will send this. Where is it? Get custom to here. So now I've just triggered this in a separate screen. And we should hopefully be able to see that it has been processed. And we can then go here and we can take it to Figaf and we can create a coding. Training 2510. Just use that for prefixes. Here, when we're creating the test screen, we can go in and say, hey, we want to put in a specific message ID for these things. Order expression, the partner expression. This is if you have ideas and content that relates to a specific user. If you want to extract the partner ID of this document. So actually, we can actually take here the XPath to the document and see if that will give us our partner expression. So now we're fetching this one message for this scenario here. And then it goes into the system. To look at this, we can look here at what has been processed, what are the different steps that's going on. If there's problems, you can download this and send to support and may give us a little more insight. But here, when it is processing, we do have also this tool where we can go and see what is actually processed as a part of this. Let's see, refresh. Now it was pretty quickly. So obviously, if you have large messages with many steps, it may take a little longer to process. We also have here the process messages. We can see how many messages has been processed. What are the statuses for reaching some of these scenarios. So that's all good. We can go in and we can see here what are the details. Also, we can see the payloads that has been processed here. Good. We then create a test case. Based on this, we can decide where we want to run it. And generally, one place should probably be fine for this. And we can see it even extracted the document number here into the partner element. Let me just reset this test case here. So when we click on it, on a test object, we do have the information about the test object. We have here information about when we're doing recording, what is the process we need to do recording in. So let's just put in the XPath here, document. And then we need to press save here. So there's also something about download additional properties. So this is if you're using MPL attached messages. This can sometimes be better and give some more details, but only selective if it actually matters, because a lot of times you would have text payloads in these and it's a little complicated to actually use this. You also see here we have only finishing and run steps. Finishing run steps, so that means that in the iflow, it will only record this one as the input and it will record this one as the output. Everything else would be excluded. Or we can go in and say, hey, I only want to select messages from this step. You can add multiple different steps. So we can add multiple different steps if we just want to record messages for these things. And obviously it makes sense to consider if you don't need everything, it's easier to just go in and say, yes, I need the input, the output, or I need these specific steps as a part of my processing. I'm not going to save this, so that should be okay. We can see it's not saved here. Under the test configuration, we have an option to select what are the comparison type you want to be using. We have something about EDI correlation ID that we're not going to use. We'll just ignore these ones for now. So just remove all of these elements. And we can see here we have a lot more communications around these. So we do have here to use mock endpoints, tests on separate iflow, use iflow to send message. This is, yeah, I guess a bit deprecated when you have the chains that we'll cover later. And then, yeah, we can see we have the same finishing and run steps here. So just save it. So now that is a blank slate. There's nothing that has been set up for it. Okay, so now we have the test case. We can then go run it. And then when you run it, we will trigger this message into the integration suite tenant. So if we go here, we will most likely see that it has been triggered here. If we click at the F logo here, we will see that it is a test suite, and we can go in and say, hey, we're actually processing this. Obviously, we also have the option here there's obviously some tricks about doing navigation. So you can either go here to the last result where you can see the processing, or you can go in here, look, and here you'll only see this test case. Here you can see the actual test run we had for this, and we can go in and say, yes, these are the parts that looks strange. Okay, so now we have run a test run where you can see that it's been processed successfully. We can then go in and say, yes, let's do the diff here. And we can see there's there's two header properties here. We'll go in and ignore those. So generally, I will go to the end, sort by the step ID, and then see what that brings. So I can then, once we have done some comparison, we can do a comparison again. And then we'll show some of these are good, some of them are bad. So we can go in here and say diff. What is the diff? There's one here about update that is being incorrectly fetched. So we can just go in and change this XPath. So it tries to calculate the best possible XPath for these things. And I think that's the only one here. So we do a comparison again. So now we can see we got all of the different documents correctly. And that means we have now created a test case that we can manage and run successfully. So this was what it took to create a test case that we can run as many times as we like. So likely the status is being updated as success. Okay. An important part here is if you want to see this iflow we're triggering, we have it right here. And let's make a modification to this. So we'll go in here, we'll make a modification to the iflow. One of the easiest places to do it is just to go in here and say training. So we have a good value 2 here that's being set. We'll save it as a version. So it's 260. And we'll deploy it. And if we go back here to our test case, so there's different ways you can run a test case on. If you run it from a test suite, you can say rerun here. Alternative, here on the testing results, you can also select rerun. Here we're only seeing one test case, so that means it's easy for us to see what's going on in it. So now it is processing the message. We have here the trace result. We can see what is being processed again. We have all of this data, so we can see, is it going further? Is it working? And we can see it completed successfully. Now we can see that there was an error down here, and if we look at the diffs, we can see, yes, this good value 2 was changed. So we have an option, we can go in and ignore it. But we actually want to be able to check that this value continues to exist. So the idea is we will go in here and we will then say update test case and use it in production. And there is something about if you have new path that's being triggered, you need to unselect them from the list. And that means that if we go back and run this, now we are expecting this new value, so we would actually be able to see that is going on. Let me just do one thing here. So it'll save as a version. So now it's saving as 261. And if I go back here and say run again, so hopefully now the test case is successful, but we can see it is actually saying, hey, we actually have a different version than the one we're actually testing on, and that's deployed. That is obviously a problem. We need to consider how this is going and what to do in these scenarios. So that is how you are creating test cases, how you can modify it, what's going on. If, for instance, you have like a text element, our comparison of text is not that good. So if there is something, you can go and say, yes, just add this as an ignore step. And you can say, yes, add it for the ignore step. And that means that if we open here the test configuration, we can then see here, exclude this step, and then that would never be compared again in this test. And this just makes it easier to do the testing because we are only focusing on the part that actually matters. So if you have a large blob of text that is being changed, then consider if this is a way for you to deal with these scenarios. On the test case, we do have some different information. So here we have a title. We can go in and put in this is the training, or we are checking standard flow on this. Okay, so this is a way you can create the test cases that gives you better insight about what's going on. All right. So that's the general approach. You switch an iflow into trace mode, fetch it. You can also do this in a different way, and there's a number of different ways that we can actually create this in. So one is we go here to the objects, the tracked object, we find the iflow. Get customer 2, we select it and we say record messages. We add it to our test suite, and then we will fetch future messages that's being processed here. Then it will do this thing about set up messages that's being processed on this specific scenario. So that's the general process. This will then, here Figaf will trigger it as iflow, and you can process it in that way. We also have a different way, and we'll try that now. So we do have this send message. So send message is like CPI or PI's send message request. Here we can go and we can create a test rule called training. The collection is going to be training. And the object is going to be get customer 2. We can select the object here. We will select get customer 2. So now when we have selected this, it knows this is the HTTP endpoint. It also supports, and we can select it if there's multiple, it supports process directs. Yeah. So some of the other ones that's also being supported here. And when we can put in the payload and say this is XML, we can set some header. Manual training. So standard HTTP process, we can run it. This will then trigger the iflow, and we can see, hey, it is actually being processed here. We can open here the Figaf message browser, and we can see what is actually the messages that's being processed here. So we also have a save button over here, so you can save it so you're not losing context whenever you go around doing something. Obviously, we still have the run, trigger message, see what is being processed on this scenario here. We also have the option here to run for recording, and this would actually switch the iflow into trace mode enable us to send in a message on the specific endpoint. And once we have processed that, we can select recording. Here we say, yes, we have created this specific message. We will add it to our test suite. And we'll call this send message. So it is the same no matter which of the different processes you're using. It is just about where we can make it easiest as possible. So now we have a test case here that we have for the send message. Let me also change this test case here so I can go here, edit, and say, also put in the title here, send message. And we want to do mocking of this. So we do have an easy way to set up mocking on this general test case. But the thing is, once you have like one flow for handling all the different message processing, if you want also to mock some endpoints, there's some different things that you need to consider. So we have this thing that's called shared configuration, which actually enables you to set up specific configuration for just one test case. So here we say one for CPI test case. We can select for a specific test case. So we'll use the one we just created. Here it can come up and say what are all the different configuration parameters we want. We can set up it with mock data. And that means that if we now go back to our test case here and check it and run it, one of the things you would notice is it takes a little longer. But the thing is, we can now see it's being run on an iflow called mock Figaf get customer 2. And one of the things we would notice here is this one is a Figaf endpoint, Figaf ERG get customers mock iflow 2. And over here, we can also see that this is called virtual. So this is calling our Figaf installation via Cloud Connector, making it possible to actually see what is being processed here. And then it obviously takes a little longer because we need to check that the iflow has been deployed before we can go in and set up these parameters for it. We can see here that it's using this comparison config here, and we can open the actual test message configuration that's being used here. So we get a lot of errors here. And that is obviously because the test message was recorded with some different header properties. When we start changing those header properties, it becomes different of what we're seeing. So now we've just ignored all of those. You saw there was an ignore property down here. You can go in and ignore one. So we do a comparison, full comparison. Now everything seems to be okay. For this, so that was a bit easier than expected. We can see the comparison now has been updated with all our header properties, but I think the actual test configuration is also up here, where we can see what is included, what is what works. So this is a way you can go in, create much more specific test cases if you want to have like a specific flow where you're using include steps or only use specific include steps. Then you'll be using this as a way to create two different configurations for the testing. So obviously this would be, if you're doing mocks, then this is the way to go around these thing. One thing on the test configuration, we also have here define headers forcefully. So if you have some headers that you want to be using that may be excluded for some reasons, and it's not being recorded, setting it here, and when we then run the test case. So let's see if we get here. run it again. Then it would, instead of using here, we're just sending direct to HTTP. Let's see. It should send it to a process direct flow. Maybe it was because the header was not in the original payload. But that is a way to force it to use the process direct header URL. If there is specific parameters that is important for your testing. Because some of the adapters do not support all configurations normally. So that is a little on how you can create different kind of test cases with the tool, being sure you do a recording, you track the messages, you see what has been added to this specific landscape for it. So I hope this gives a good understanding what it is to create a specific test case. We can obviously put a test case under our test suites. So here we can see the test case under the test suite. We can also see it under here, test cases. We can see it and we can navigate to it. And also, if we are on an agent object, we can go in. So this is an iflow. We can see all the different test cases we have on it, or we can see if it's linked to different systems. So there's different ways you can go in and see what's going on. Here you would have, if we have multiple different messages that we are going to trigger to send messages. And here we even have an easy way to send these messages that we're looking at. One other thing, when we are in a test result, we have up here, we have an option here to open traces. This goes to the CPI trace and where we can see what is going on. So some of the things that we would often see is that we would have messages that is not being processed, like we are not recording them. And the reason would be like we're getting not received, as we have here. That's probably. Then most likely it is because the process somehow failed and went into an exception branch, and then we do not see the last part up here. So it obviously makes sense to check the iflow to see, does it actually produce the correct content that we have in here. And we do have here this open Figaf message browser where we can see in the message processing what has actually been processed, all the different payloads of this. We're seeing it on the correlation ID, so it becomes easier, and we would see when we are using the pipeline concept, then it's also a little easier to understand what goes on here. Let's see. I think that's the main part about creating tool, creating test cases, being able to see these polling results here and understand them. You can go here, you can see what has been polled, what's going on here. There's also polling progress out here where you can go in and see, okay, so what has been message processed, what's not. And I think there's one here, maybe that's an exclude part that's being added to it. So this is a way you can go around improving and understand the operations of the testing results that you have. I think the last one I just wanted to check. So when you're going in here, you also can see the different messages that we have. We can go in here and we can actually just say, view this payload. We can go in here and edit this to, say, Daniel. And if we press save and run this test case again, we would actually see that that would fail with that one of these elements. We should expect that it said Daniel. Now we are getting VI net or something like that, if I recall correctly. Now we're getting too many errors. Maybe that was on the mock settings. So yeah, so it was a header property that became set. Let's ignore that. So let's see here if it actually changed it to. Yeah, so now we can see that the iflow has been changed to a process direct. And this means that this is being sent to a specific process direct inside of the Figaf tool, where we can handle these things. So we have and that means if we go here and check the open message in Figaf browser, we can see that it triggers 2 different iflows here. What was it that I was trying to cover? If you get lost in it, you can always see here test cases run. We can see we have the last here. We can do the checks process full comparison. Let's see. So now we are getting a few new ones. We're having an error here, diff, and then that is this custom ID here that was changed. So we can see here the diff was Daniel and custom ID here. And we can also see that there was one here that said not received. Maybe that is coming, or maybe there was different mistakes around this. So normally I would just go in and say, yes, I would update the test case. We should obviously check, is that expected or something else that relates to this? But if you're changing the flow because you're changing content, you can go in and then update the test cases based on this, and then you should run the test case again. So we can go here, view the test case, here the test case, and click run on it. So do spend some time on the navigation of these things. And we're still using mock for this specific endpoint. So this is pretty fast, and we should see that it is successful in a few seconds. Okay, cool. That was what I wanted to cover in this this part of the video. The next is, now we will go into how do we actually create more complicated scenarios. And to start out, I just want to use one of the things we have already done when we're doing migration. We have here a chain objects, and we just want to be using the same one. So I'll just copy the names here. And that means when we go here to our iflow, we'll go here to the chain. We will then create a new chain here, new chain objects, and this is called train invoice. And when we are going to do this, we need to specify the payloads that we are going to be used here. So we will use all the different flows. So first we need to select what is the inbound flow that we will be using, where is it that we want to send in messages, and then we want to select what is the outgoing flows that we are selecting. So we can select multiple here, and we can also go in and select a different one and say, yes, we don't need that. That's just going to create confusion. And this is a way to create these more complicated tests that covers multiple different scenarios. So now we have a chain here that says, hey, if we're sending in a message on this interface, what is the expected output we are getting from this? And we can then go here up here to it. We can search for chain. So it's a specific type. And it's still, and we have here the invoice. It's called train invoice here. So we can go in and say, yes, record this message. We will just add it to our same test suite. Here, it is a little more complicated to do these because you need to switch multiple into trace mode and stuff like that. So we'll just say, yes, let's use this one. So now we are waiting on this message to be triggered. And to do that, we have here, we can go in and see what is actually the test cases we have here. So we can go in, we can find one of these inbound messages that we have up here. View. So now I'm just using one of the examples that we have. And then I will use my send message request here. I will create a new one that's called train. I guess I'll put it. So this is going to be oh, that's one train. No, got it up here. Train invoice. So this is the iflow we want to be using for this drip. And then obviously you need to consider where you're searching for this. Is it the technical or display name? Because in the technical we have underscores, in the display name we do not have it. We select the train here. Now we have two. And send message. And I obviously lost it, so it is could show it again. We go to our we go back here to our CPI messages. Here we have this iflow that's been triggered. We have the agent test cases. We have here our agent, the message, and we can go in and view. We can set a header demo. Not sure that's going to be used, and we just say save, and we can say run. Now, this run should now trigger multiple different messages, and we can see here that we actually trigger the full pipeline flow with all the different steps that is needed in the pipeline. And we can see it's using a collation ID. That's because it's been sent by Figaf, so that's a little easier for us to see what is going on. So I had a test suite here, and in my test suite, I now have a recording request for this, and I go in and say, hey, a recording request is like us expecting to find some messages on this. And we can then see, hey, we are getting these. We can see all the details. Now we can see we have message flow 1. I think it should also show in some of the different places. We can see all the different details that's being set. We say process, and now we can see we got 27 messages. If we check the details here, we can see the iflow that has been called in this. So we have an inbound that's being sent to this iflow, and then we have one that's sent to this and one that's sent to the other one. So that's pretty easy. We just create a test case on this, and now it still waits for 2 because we said we want the next 3. So I'm just deleting all these subsequent messages. So right now we have a new test case. We can run it, and then it says, hey, we need to license these objects, where we'll see, okay, what is actually being processed here. And we can then, if we look here in the monitor, open trace messages, we can see that we have the same flow being triggered with the same messages. We are getting some errors here. Someone have not configured things correctly. Shame on them. And now we're getting a lot of errors on these things. Obviously, when you are doing multiple different messages, it may take a little longer time. And especially since this one is sometimes failing, we do not always get the details from it. But what we can go in here and we can look at the diffs in the same way. There is a new unique ID. Obviously, we can ignore that. And if we do our test comparison here, process full comparison, we can see now there's a little better. We can see that there's some text elements here, and Figaf is not really good at text elements. So it is just complaining about some date and split ID, so that should also be okay. We can do a comparison again. So now all of that is successful. We didn't get the message from this last iflow, and then obviously you need to go in and check. So on this iflow, what is the error? Can we fix this? So we can go inline debugging. Just get the error here, so let's just say, hey, unreachable. Let's just do the simple approach for it. That's just to delete the send step. So save versions, deploy. And sometimes we are able to get it. There is different options that you can go in and accept that a message fails. So we can try to run it again. And somehow this date is out of line. We should obviously have the 31st here. If we look here at the messages that have been processed, so now all of them is processed, all of the messages is there, but obviously we're getting some diffs here. That there's a currency, we should obviously ignore that. Go in and ignore the currency, do our comparison again, process full comparison. There's also some up here, divs. That should still be part of it. So now we have created this this test that covers a flow where we have multiple different scenarios. So obviously, if you use this chaining, we can see that the iflow was sent to this one, and that's the main one for it. But we can also see the test object here, and we can see the objects that is a part of this this scenario. We can add more if we want to, making it possible for us to actually check everything that goes on as a part of this flow, expanding the test suite and the test horizon about how to create messages. I hope you enjoyed this. You got some idea about how you can create test cases a little better, giving you some more insight about what it is that the tool can do to manage your testing. So go try it out. It's not that difficult to experiment. Do spend some time on figuring out how to navigate these things. Thanks.